has either just peaked or is just about to. I think it already did out here in Arizona, which isn't saying much because we couldn't really see a lot of it. A bit, and I did see some, and I got kind of a interesting photo on my phone with it. But I was just watching in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where there's they're calling it Eclipseville there. There's a huge group of people camping out there, and it just peaked there where they were completely dark. They were in the path of where they could see the whole thing.
Any Kelly Hopkinsville situation going on in the dark there?
No, there are lots of people outside having fun. But yes, that is where, and it's in my lecture. In fact, you could go see it at UFOCongressVideos.com, but you could see my lecture on strange alien cases, and I talk about the Kelly Hopkinsville case, a very important case in the 50s where it essentially made the Little Green Men saying more prominent and famous, and I'm going to be talking about that also at Devil's Tower next month.
Oh, wow. That's one of my cases that I really, I'm fascinated by that case.
By Kellysville? Kelly Hopkinsville?
The incident, when they were up on the roof and they were shooting at him, and it was just really
great case.
Quite amazing. They were horrified, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be talking about that at the Devil's Tower UFO Rendezvous, which is going to be at Devil's Tower in honor of the 40th anniversary of Close Encounters. I'm really excited about this. It's going to be in Hewlett, Wyoming, and you can go to devilstowerUFORendezvous.com to see more about it. About Jan Harzan, Mark D'Antonio.
Right, told me about that.
Well, I don't think I told the listeners, though. Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Chuck Zukowski, Travis Walton, and Richard Beckwith will all be there speaking. I'm excited because I'm going to be talking about Spielberg. And so I'll be talking about the Kelly Hopkinsville event because that inspired Spielberg many of his movies.
Wow. I don't know if I knew that. That's interesting.
If you would have saw my lecture, but I don't think you made it to the conference. You should see the lecture because if you're interested in that, you would love it. Otherwise, maybe this one will get recorded and I'll be able to upload that or something. But yeah. Yeah,
right. So what's the date on that?
September 14th through the 16th. And I'm a big Spielberg fan, and I've been following all of his UFO interests, so I've accumulated a lot of information and videos of him talking about UFOs. So yeah, I'm excited for the opportunity.
Great.
But speaking back to the eclipse, can you see a lot of it? I mean, is it really cool where you are?
Well, I downloaded the iPhone app that Jeffrey Bennett, the astrophysicist that you and I both know, he created the app, and it shows that as we speak right now, it's peaked in my area in the state of Maine. It peaks at 2:43, and that's about when we're talking right now. So I just went out and looked at it and did the pinhole thing, and I can see most of the sun, but it does look, the sky looks like it's really cloudy. It's kind of dim looking. Is that what you saw too?
Kind of, but the pinhole thing, the best thing is to get the glasses. By far, so you could see something. Because otherwise, the pinhole thing, which is kind of what I did, is boring. I've done that before. But really, unless you're really close, it's kind of just like any other, eclipse. But what's amazing about this, and I do regret it, not going to somewhere where I could be with the full eclipse. And I know I'm going to regret this for a long time. But hopefully I'll have to go to another country to get that opportunity sometime.
Yeah, I know. It's funny how it just did a swath right across the country. And cool. People are gathering, gathered from Salem, Oregon, all the way across the country.
Cool stuff. Now, also, what's cool about this, if you go to the Google search, of course, they're featuring, just google.com, they're featuring the eclipse on their little thing on the top, as they usually do, you know, the little graphic, they feature what's going on, so the eclipse is huge, so of course they're featuring that. But what's funny is aliens are involved. So if you go look at the Google graphic, it's super cool. It's essentially aliens bouncing the moon back and forth.
Little green man in there, too.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. Yeah. So what's funny about this, too, is, of course, there are a lot of conspiracy theories about the moon, and the moon being artificial and being brought here by aliens and that sort of thing. And largely because of this extraordinary phenomena that the moon, so the sun is 400 times larger than the moon. However, the sun is 400 times further away than the moon. And that's awfully coincidental because that's what makes this opportunity of what's happening today be possible, is that coincidentally, those two factors make it so this small object can pass in front of this humongous object and appear to be the exact same size.
Isn't that something? So, you know, eventually they'd say the moon moves away a little bit, so it won't. Well, this type of eclipse isn't going to happen for a long time, right? Again.
Well, it will, but not, I guess, in the United States. What was unique about this one is that the epicenter, you know, the place where it's completely covered, swept through the United States and only the United States, and that's what made it really unique.
Ah. Wow, I didn't know that. Wow, that's interesting.
And a great opportunity for those in this country to go get off our butts and not get mucked up in daily life like you and I did and miss
again.
it. Yeah, what the hell? Mm. But this is really funny, too. Another coincidence that you brought up Jeffrey Bennett.
Okay.
And here's why. So the 2014 videos we have not uploaded because they haven't been ready to our video on demand. So we have almost every other year and almost all of them for every other year, but we don't have 2014. So I started working on that, and literally, or as Rob Lowe says in Parks and Rec, literally right before I came over here to get on the phone with you, I began uploading Jeffrey Bennett's talk at the UFO Congress in 2014.
Wow, that's pretty spooky.
That is kind of weird. And then you bring him up.
I know. Wow.
Whoa. He was great, too. I loved his talk. I think it is so good. Jeffrey Bennett is an astrophysicist. He's a mainstream science guy. However, he's open. He likes the topic of UFOs. He's open to the possibility of ET visitation. As he says in I think the panel from 2014, he was asked that specifically. And I can't remember if he did it in his talk. However, what is interesting about his talk is a lot of theoretical, a lot of, kind of theorizing or pondering what extraterrestrial civilizations might be like from a scientific perspective, and looking at ourselves and technology. And a big question is, are we even going to make it, to...
Right.
How long are we going to be able to survive? So it was an amazing talk. One of my favorite talks of that year. So that's getting up, and that's going to be in the video on demand here soon.
One of my favorite sayings of Jeffrey's is, he was also a visiting scientist at NASA too, as well. One of my favorite sayings is that he and some colleagues have talked, quietly about this situation, that they think that if any intelligence can get through the bottleneck of technology without blowing themselves up, they will indeed be traveling the stars.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really cool concept. And he kind of talks about that at length on this lecture.
Mm-hmm. Really
cool stuff. Yeah, he's great. So there was another coincidence. Oh, no, there wasn't another coincidence. But I have another update. Okay. You ready for this one?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Moving on from the eclipse, which is cool stuff. And, of course, people are hoping to see some UFOs and stuff. And I'm sure some people will claim to, whether they are truly anomalous or not. We'll find out, I guess. But so I guess where I'm going to be in a week from today.
Let's see. That would be near the end of August. I have no idea.
Mars.
I knew it. It was right on the tip of my tongue.
No, sir.
So what do you mean, Mars?
Did you really think you thought I was going to
No.
be on Mars?
Not really.
Yeah, these wild claims, of people going to Mars, I'll be able to confirm them or not next week. No, actually, I will be on Mars, but it's actually the set of Mars.
Wow.
Although I'm not traveling all the way to Mars, it is far. It is Budapest.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so I'm going to be traveling to Budapest for like 3 days, or not even that. The traveling will be 2 of those 3 days.
Yeah.
To go to the set of Mars. So, the Science Channel has had this Mars series going, and really cool series. And they're starting to shoot for the 2nd season. And so I've been invited to come out for that, to check it out, do some social media kind of fun stuff, and then write some stuff online. And so, the set of Mars for the Mars TV show in Budapest.
Amazing. You have the greatest life. You really do.
I don't know.
You get to do some amazing things.
I do get to do some fun stuff. And you know what? What's funny is a lot of this stuff, it's and I guess this is journalism. And people, I think this is one thing people should understand about journalism and doing all this sort of thing, is that it doesn't pay. It's fun, but it doesn't pay. So a lot of journalists, or a lot of people, like a friend of mine, Aaron Sagers, he does the coolest stuff. He's hanging out with, stars, and he mostly does. He's spoken at the 2014 UFO Congress also, but he does all of these like conferences where he does panels for sci-fi conferences and comic book conferences and stuff like that. So sometimes you get to do, or Ben Hansen, for example, he gets to do lots of fun stuff. But it's not like it pays, which is a big struggle for him because he's trying to start a family. But it is fun stuff. But there's a sacrifice. So it just means, you got to be able to and willing to do some of this kind of stuff without compensation, essentially, but for the adventure of it. And I'm all for that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you really got to, when you have a family, you have priorities. I can understand the struggling, but also the independence and to be able to do exciting things is very alluring. Very hard to say no to. Awesome. Who's the guest today?
Oh, good question. That's a wonderful question. It's probably something I should have started off with. But such exciting stuff with the eclipse and everything. Richard Hoffman is my guest today.
Oh, yeah.
I've had him on before, and he's part of the Scientific Coalition for Ufology, which is an organization that was created actually to investigate that Puerto Rico UFO case. So I've had him on before to talk about that case, which is pretty exciting. However, what we're going to be talking about today is an article that some of you might have seen on openminds.tv talking about the spook lights of Cloverdale. So there's a place in Alabama, which is where he, until recently, was the state director of MUFON. He's actually been in MUFON since it started, literally. But he resigned recently. Because he's very into the scientific kind of aspect, and MUFON's moved a little bit away from that, so he's decided to invest more time in the SCU and on some of these other cool projects that he's working on. So that's what we're talking about here. Just this phenomena, kind of like the Marfa lights or the Hessdalen lights, where there are these balls of lights, except this is in Alabama.
Right, yeah, and I know I've seen some images of that, like the streaking across the sky.
No, as far as I know, Richard has not ever done any streaking.
Well, that'll be. I hope you brought that up and asked him.
Yeah, I didn't, so we'll have to save that for next time.
Yeah,
or maybe you can have him on Podcast UFO and ask him about that.
Yeah, he's been on before. He's really good. Really enjoy talking to him.
Yeah, so that's the show today.
Doesn't he always wear a bow tie, or am I thinking of someone else?
I know he does often wear a bow tie when he dresses up or when he does lectures and stuff like that.
Right. That's the guy.
Fancy fella.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Are we ready for a little news?
Oh, yeah. Let's talk some news.
All right. I'll start off. This is interesting because you see this quite often, and that's the title of it was Did Fox News Catch a UFO Buzzing the U.S. Capitol, written by Alejandro Rojas recently. So I suggest anyone check this video out. I've watched it 2 or 3 times. It's really interesting because my first thought is it's a bird, going by. But then I looked really closely. There's absolutely no flapping of wings, which would be fine if it was going straight, horizontal across the screen or actually down. But it's on an incline, so there's absolutely no flapping that you can see, and it's sort of a yellow tinge to it. I don't know if you noticed that, Alejandro.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So I've looked at it, like I said, 3 or 4 times. It's really hard to figure out what this is. Now, I know at the bottom of your article you wrote that it could be something like a Frisbee or something like that, which, is possible. It doesn't really – it seems like you'd see the shape of a Frisbee, going past the screen. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to do some tests with that. Have you shown this? I know this was presented to MUFON by someone who, did a video and screenshot of it. But did you show this to Mark D'Antonio or anyone like that to get his opinion?
No. As far as I know, Mark has not seen it yet. Now, MUFON does its own investigation, so I was going to kind of see where they'll go with this, and we'll see. The leading theory is a Frisbee. And I can definitely see that. In fact, there's a lot of people who were upset about me posting it. And like, this is a Frisbee, it's obvious. But of course, just like any video, people are fighting about it. And arguing over what it might be. Because a lot of people are saying, there's no way it's a Frisbee because of it shoots up, in this other direction. And if it's a Frisbee, it might be a yellow and white one because the leading edge seems to be light in color. And I can't see anything. It doesn't look like it's rotating. Spinning.
Right.
So, although maybe you wouldn't be able to see that spinning, I think what we'd have to do is throw a Frisbee, fling a Frisbee, fly a Frisbee, because it's smooth. So, I mean, it's flying, and see what happens. There is, of course, this is Washington, D.C., the capital, and there is a park, of course, in front of the Capitol. So it's possible it's a Frisbee. In fact, that's probably most likely, but some people are debating that and claiming it's not a Frisbee. And there is something weird that happens. When it gets in front of the Capitol, it seems to fade out, which made me think maybe it's a hoax. Maybe it was a hoaxed video, because the person who submitted the video, all they did was submit this little clip. And that was it. They didn't even describe it. All they said was something like, this is what their report said. It flew in front of the Capitol building while I was watching Fox News. That's all they wrote with this this video clip. So
there's no way to even check when this supposedly happens.
Yeah.
I guess live.
You could look at the news stories and then probably determine from there. I haven't taken the time to do that, but I did take the video and slow it down and blow it up, and then put it on YouTube, slowed down greatly, so that people can kind of analyze it. And of course, it's gotten a ton of hits, and and a ton of, as usual when it comes to social media, some good comments, but a lot of really people like to be mean.
Yeah, I know that. Wow. You can see it talks about people killed in Acapulco, Mexico resort. So you can kind of see when that aired and try to figure that out. Because, of course, it is possible that he might have, the person that submitted it might have done something CGI and
Here it is.
sent it.
That story looks like it was on August 13th and or 14th. So that was just about a week ago.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, though. You do see a lot of things in newscasts come up, and some of them are, faked, but also, after the fact. But some of them are most likely like birds or bugs or something like that.
Yeah. Well, they have their cameras on all the time, so.
Mm-hmm. And there's only one case, and I can't even remember when and where it was, where they were filming news where they actually did stop and film what was in the sky. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Did you see that?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm thinking of the same one you are, but there was a case in Colorado where they were actually going out there to film a UFO story, and they captured one of the objects on video a little bit there. And so that was pretty interesting. They were white orbs. I know, like, Rich Hoffman felt strongly it was a Google balloon, and they were the whole flap out there that was happening were Google balloons. And there were Google balloons flowing in the area. However, I'm not so sure about that because the Google balloons, at least for that period of time, had, or at least most of them, and according to Google, they have tracking devices on them. And as many people, and I linked to some of the people who looked into it found you can go to those airplane like flight tracker sites. I think one's called Flight Tracker, and you can track those Google balloons so you could see what's in the area. And some people were able to see where the Google balloons were at the time. And so, so it's pretty interesting.
All part of investigating.
Another interesting story we have that I would like to point people to, otherwise I think we're about out of time, is a story from Linda Zimmerman. So Linda Zimmerman did the Hudson Valley UFO book. She wrote that. And she wrote a story for us, or an article called UFOs Flying Dark. And it's a really great idea because, there's all this controversy. Why would UFOs have lights? Why are UFOs all lights in the sky? And she wanted to make the point that there are objects seen that don't have lights on them. And so that's the article she wrote about, mostly triangles seen at night without lights on them. So some really interesting sightings.
Wow. Yeah, you don't hear that. That is funny you say that because I have heard people talk about triangles without lights, but not any others, really. I mean, the one, amazing sighting I had no lights on it. But it wasn't really dark either. It was, twilight.
Wow.
So,
see,
and that was a disc.
Oh, yours was a disc. My uncle had one like that. That was a large rectangular object in Aspen, Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a great, she thinks of great topics. The last one was on UFOs and dogs.
Yeah, which was awesome. And pets. She's just a great thinker. I love Linda Zimmerman. She's wonderful.
Yeah, she's wonderful. Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time.
All right. Well, thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be right back with Rich Hoffman. I am happy to welcome back to the show Rich Hoffman. Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Al?
Good. It's great to talk to you again. How have you been?
Well, I've been busy between work and family life and then everything else. It's been hectic, but it's been great. This is a good summer. I'm looking forward to my vacation next week at the Hilton Head. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that sounds fun. So things have changed a bit since we last talked to you. So you're no longer a state director with MUFON.
Yeah, I basically resigned my position as state director as well as the director of strategic projects. I'm basically now just a lifetime member because I was a benefactor prior to that separation, and so that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. And there was a weird noise. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I sure did.
That was very strange. I wonder if the listeners could hear that too. That was really weird. But anyway, so you're not with MUFON anymore, but you're still doing UFOs.
I sure am. I'm not going to just turn away after 52 years of studying them, and I'm going to keep on investigating, and that's what I like to do, and I probably will do as long as I'm still upright and above the ground.
You were with MUFON for a long time, though, right? Didn't you join in, what was it, 1969 when they started or something like that?
You got it. I'm one of the. I think I joined right in 1970. They had started it in May. I guess they incorporated it, let's put it that way, and they were the Midwest UFO Network at the time. And I seen an announcement about them coming into existence and immediately sent in my my interest. And so I've been with them for a long time. I wish them well. I certainly do. I think that my separation was, based around some of the movements I saw that were kind of like away from science, and certainly the last symposium, in my estimation, wasn't really helping to support science. So I decided that I was going to move on and go towards more of a scientific bent, and that's pretty much where I'm at.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know what? I want to take a minute to talk about that. Not MUFON, really. I think you explained that well enough, and of course, I've talked about the symposium, but I mean the importance of science, because I don't know. I guess it does get a little bit concerning. I know for you and some of our colleagues, when larger organizations or people in general kind of move away from it. And I guess, what are the sentiments you hear out there? Why do you think it happens that people move away? It seems that, I want to get your opinion on this. Science is hard. It's rigorous. And a lot of people seem to get kind of disappointed or impatient.
Yeah, and that's very, very true. I think that my take on the whole thing after my 52 years of watching it has been that, overall, we as a culture, have shifted kind of away from science as being something that the everyday person has an interest in. Although I will sit and say that there's still a good number of people who like astronomy, who like meteorology. There are people who are in engineering, but even in a lot of those professions, the number of young people are not going to some of those things. And the UFO field, if early in the early days was, it was all about science. It was about what can we do to collect evidence? How do we do what we do? And what was it? And so that was our primary focus, and we didn't have all these other distractions like I guess exopolitics, and we didn't have all the other kinds of things that come up with UFOs now, and we didn't have a YouTube that was promoting fake videos or any of that stuff. So to me, it was more like if you got into this, you were going to be applying it to the best of your ability, and we were always challenged because we had if you go with a volunteer base kind of approach, a lot of people lost. As the Condon Report closed out Project Blue Book, and then the National Academy of Sciences did their little shtick on it, and then you started to see that they had basically said, well, it's no longer a credible subject, and so there was all the promotion that was within the mainstream science to be able to say, hey, look, don't even go into the UFO thing. Jokingly, I saw a thing where I was on a site where I was going to look at how do I write scientific articles, and on the front page of that was don't do anything on UFOs. And I'm going like, okay, well, there's a message right up front. Don't bother to do anything like a journal or anything like on this UFO subject. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is that there seems to be a rise in the level of these younger people to be very naive and gullible. I think I've talked about this in the past, but there's a lack of critical thinking skills that we see. I was in the training and development profession, and we were alerted to the fact that we didn't see students and younger people at the time, and this was like years and years ago that I was doing this, but that we were seeing that critical thinking was a major concern for students, and we had to change our way we were doing things. And it has risen to the top, but then couple that with all of the social media that's out there that gives you just erroneous information and very bad information. And pretty soon, you're off into La La Land, and you accept La La Land as being the norm. And so when somebody comes in and tries to apply a very scientific approach or something like that and use that rigor that you're trying to talk about that you have in science, it just doesn't seem to rise to the level of being of interest. And, I'll say this much, Al, I think that, MUFON was attempting to try to put, and do its best to be able to create science. And Jan was also working with me to be able to get technology and put in place. But the struggle that we continued to have was that, again, we're getting maybe an ex-witness might sign up to say that, I want to be an investigator. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily good at it, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, despite the fact you offer training, it doesn't suddenly make them start thinking in a scientific way, And so you run into problems there. Even if you handed out technology to people, would they even understand what that particular technology does or how to use it in the field? And so there's those challenges. And we just haven't seen a whole lot of scientific-minded people that are coming into the field. And the only thing that I've seen, and I'm very encouraged by that, by the way, but there's a number of small projects that people are doing from people who have been in it for a long time, like Mark Roediger is doing with UFO data. That Ron Olds was doing out in California with putting together his technical package. Shallon Holt is doing something with basically getting some data, and then you had Mark D'Antonio and Doug Trumbull that were looking at UFOTOG. So there are these little projects, and because technology has definitely come down in cost, they're trying to assemble devices that would be able to be beneficial in getting data, and that's what this phenomena has needed all along. Mm-hmm. It's not another report from some witness to say, I saw a light in the sky 20 years ago. That's not going to get at us anywhere. And we're not even hitting the other parts of the spectrum, we only see photos from cameras and, what about the infrared? What about ultraviolet? What about, all these other kinds of things that we can get from that electromagnetic spectrum. So if we attack it in a very broad way and then look at this, we might be able to do something where we might actually be able to get some results that are meaningful and some helpful data. But it's not the collection of just testimonies from people that said that they saw these objects. That's not going to get us anywhere. Mm-hmm. We got 70,000 cases in MUFON. Have we made any convincing strides towards producing evidence? No. We got a lot of good cases that seem to be rather unexplainable, but yet we still struggle with the fact that we can't provide anything that makes a dent. And as close as we've come so far, I guess, might be the Aguadilla case in the sense that you do get something that's kind of interesting in the sense that it's an infrared kind of video. But anyway, we're lacking those kind of other kinds of tools being applied. And again, it's more scientific mindedness and a definite specific approach that has to be taken. And that means we need to get those kinds of people who think that way together.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying? And that's the critical thing we've got to be able to come up with.
Yeah, and I understand MUFON's movement and the intense pressure, because when I was doing PR, we get so many people, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I used to always say, well, we can't do everything for everybody. There's other groups doing some of those sort of things.
Yeah.
We've got to focus on what other people aren't doing, which is our mission statement, which is the science. But some people get disappointed with that, and so it's always a struggle. But it's great that because my heart, even though I cover everything in this field and I try to cover what's going on out there to share with people, my heart is in the science area. So I've always try to keep an eye and grease the wheels and keep that sort of thing happening. It always makes me think of that JFK, and let's see if I could do a good impression. It always makes me think of his quote, "We chose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard."
Wow, you did that very well.
Did you like it? Did I do okay?
I like that. You did a great job, Hal. Wow. I think you could be in the next movie, and that would be great, and you could play the part.
That would be fun. I'll do that.
But yeah, exactly. I think to me it's like one of those things where it's like, and that's precisely, it's hard, but it's also doing it smartly. So I think that, if we focus our efforts on going after like what we can and tackling the best cases we can come up with and going into greater detail. For example, we couldn't figure out what the Agua Dia thing is, and we spent 2 years looking at that. But there are cases like that you need to spend a lot of time, and you really need to do the digging, and you need to have scientific-minded people approaching it. It's not just like, let me fill out a report form and have it done within a 90-day window. So I think that, there are some cases that warrant the fact that you spend a lot more time on it, and you should do a full court press. And especially when you get like evidence that comes out like, in the form of maybe a very good video clip with a lot of references, and maybe it's an infrared. That's something relatively new to us. We just need to take the time to look at it, analyze it, get smart about it, and find out what we can do. And so I think that's, we need those scientific approaches to it and to really think things through. And that's kind of like what I've done with this Cloverdale project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Agua Dia, for those who don't remember, we've talked about it so much, and the last time you were on the show, we talked about it quite a bit, but the Homeland Security case that was handled outside of MUFON, it was actually handled with a group you and others formed called the Scientific Coalition for Ufology, which now, I'm involved with also that, and we're getting some more movement around it to have it one of, hopefully, a bastion of scientific thought and work towards this field. But this new case is exciting because, we've talked a lot about the Hesdalen lights on the show, because that's exciting, where they have these light phenomena that happens in Denmark. But Cloverdale essentially is something similar, right? In your neck of the woods, maybe you can explain what this phenomena is and how far observations of it have gone back.
Sure. Well, I live in Huntsville, which is, if you look at it, it's like maybe 15 minutes south of the Tennessee state line, and it's in the middle part of that northern section of the state. I had monthly MUFON meetings, and I still have these meetings. We just don't call them MUFON, but I got these people that are meeting, and all along while I've been here in the Huntsville area, that I've had people, make occasional mentions of this, ball lightning or ball lights that they call them, that were over, and they would call them orbs. They call them all different kinds of things that were flying around this area just north of Florence, which, if you look at Florence, Alabama, it's pretty much over near the Mississippi state line. But anyway, I would get people telling me about these lots of lights that are being seen over there, and I kind of like, okay, well, lights, and then I would occasionally get MUFON reports from people in that vicinity who would be describing these orbs that were moving around and doing some interesting things. And so I would check them out, and typically I didn't see that it was like a repeatable phenomenon. It could have been an aircraft, could all do different kinds of things. Well, I got a hold. Actually, I was contacted by a gentleman by the name of Wyatt Cox. In fact, he contacted me several years ago and mentioned something about these lights that were over in an area of Cloverdale, and then we just recently got back in touch with each other, and of course now I've got a lot more time because I'm not doing the MUFON stuff, but I said, well, let's focus on that. Let's see what it is. So basically what I did is he's published a book. It's called, I believe, the Cloverdale Spook Lights. And anyway, he had him and another friend of his that I guess they were living in the Florence area became aware of this, and these lights that were moving around people's farms that are up in that area. And they were saying that they would see lights that would be rather large, that would be moving around, and in fact they would be, going up near trees or in between trees, and then they would get up to a certain altitude, and anyway, these things were being reported by the residents, but nobody, or they would talk about it, and it's kind of like, oh, there's those lights again, they didn't report it. And so consequently, it's like, turns out a lot of residents over there know about this thing. Well, he became aware of it, and him and his friend spent from roughly right around, this is right around the 1973 time period, and basically they were starting to see reports, just like, 1973 was a very hot year for UFO reports in general. As you very well know, that's a major flap year, but it seemed as though that there were these lights that were being seen around the Florence and north of that Florence area. And so him and his friend would go out and they would try to see what they could find, and they got permission to be able to go on people's farms and some clearing kind of areas, and they started to document the fact that there were these lights that were out there. And in fact, basically, he came up with some sort of a way of classifying them, and he talks about in his book, where you have, and then it's kind of like by color. So you have a white light, you'll have a blue light, and then you'll have kind of like an orange or yellow-orange kind of like light that, and those three primary colors tend to be the most common. The sizes were interesting in the sense that the white and the blue tend to be roughly 2 to 4 feet in diameter, while the yellow-orange tend to be about 8 foot in diameter. And they started noticing that, and again, as these things are moving around, like a good example of how they came up with the 8 foot in diameter was the fact that this thing was above a railroad track. And so you could actually get an estimate, and you knew the size of the railroad track and so on. They talk about this in their book. And it seems that those colors have an association pretty much with the time of year that you look at these things. So during the summer months, they tend to be more whitish. As the days get cooler, or the nights get cooler, and toward the fall, they tend to be more in this yellow-orange. The blue ones kind of like, are popping up here, there, and everywhere in terms of the time period, at least as far as I could see from what I've learned so far. But definitely in the cooler nights from a period of like about October through maybe like, about March or something of that nature, or April, you could go into this area, and they tended to be that large variety. And the frequency of them could be that you're seeing many of these things, and they generally are just after sundown, and up to maybe like about midnight. That's when they were out there, and so you could, on some nights, you'd be able to go out there and see as many as 3 or 4 of these things.
Wow.
And the other thing is that they don't seem to be impacted at all by wind. So you've got these lights that apparently they said that they seemingly move up from the ground, and they start rising, and they're moving in a straight line. They tend to go east and west or west to east, and they are basically, like I said, not impacted by wind. They tend to be these balls of, if you would, like a plasma or something like a ball plasma. You had a situation on one particular case, and this was in the newspaper articles for the Florence paper over there, that spoke of a woman who saw an object, and then short time after that, feathers came flying out of the sky. Well, that indicates that maybe a bird went into one, and was immediately zapped or something. You have, but I mean, again, so this repeatable phenomenon that you can actually go take a look at. Now, for the most part, we believe, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that they are a natural phenomena, and especially when you look at other, that the fact that there seems to be these areas where you have those kind of multiple things. So if you look at it, like, Dr. Harley Rutledge talked about the Piedmont sightings in 1973 that were going on, and these lights that were moving around. You have the Marfa lights. You've got the Brown Mountain lights. And by the way, we just basically looked at Joshua P. Warren's presentation that he gave several years ago for you on the Brown Mountain lights. And in fact, we took a look at that video, and a lot of his descriptions and things, like he said, and him and I have been in conversation with each other, are very, very similar. I mean, going back to the time of the year and the fact that it's cooler, and that seems to make these lights a different color and more frequent. And, he was looking at it from the standpoint that it might have some sort of relationship to what they call K waves, and it's like space weather. If you look at some sort of space weather relationship, that there showed that. Plus, in the Brown Mountain area, you've got a large number of fault lines that are moving along this mountain chain, if you would, where if you go look at for geophysical kind of like maps for the area that we're talking about, you'll see that there's maybe like one fault that's going north to south, but it's a very small one. And
we've got to take a quick break, and then we'll talk some more about that aspect of it. But you mentioned 1973 was actually the year I was born, and I suspect, there's a video out there that relates to how I believe I came to this planet. It's called Rocket by Baby. It's a Bugs Bunny, the Looney Tunes. So Google Looney Tunes Rocket by Baby if you want to see my origin story. Do you remember that video?
I sure do.
Yeah, that's a great one. All right, so we're going to take a quick break for KGRA. Of course, podcast listeners will be right back, but for KGRA, you're going to hear a lot of great commercials. So definitely patronize the commercials that you hear here. But we'll be back in just a minute with Open Minds Radio. All right, we are back with Rich Hoffman talking about the Cloverdale spook lights is what they used to be called, or at least the researchers you mentioned, Wyatt Cox, had a book called Spook Lights about these lights. Now, you were talking about some of the other light phenomena like Marfa lights. I had mentioned Hessdalen before. But in the Hessdalen lights, what was surprising, he said this at, what's his name? Eric...
You're talking about Erling Strand?
Erling Strand, yeah, at the MUFON Symposium that you and I both spoke at, and then at our UFO Congress last year. He has been investigating those lights with a lot of different devices and things like that. He had mentioned that, a lot of people out there believe them to be some sort of, natural phenomena. But he disagreed. He felt there was some sort of intelligence behind these objects. You mentioned earlier that you feel that the lights here in Alabama and possibly the Marfa lights and others do have a natural an answer that may lie in like some sort of natural phenomena, you think?
Yeah, I think that we all tend to seemingly agree that they tend to be some sort of a ball plasma of some sort of nature. And it's like anything that I think, going back to whether or not these have, some sort of sentience and can think and they don't, for example, these move in a straight line and they may disappear and then suddenly they'll come back and appear, but they eventually go out. They, at least the ones over in Cloverdale now, they're moving in pretty much a straight line path.
Mm-hmm.
And where you might, and you see others that have a little bit more deviation to them in terms of their flight path or the path that they take. And I would only caution that we as humans tend to be anthropomorphic, and we want to be able to turn anything we see and make patterns out of it, and our minds would interpret something and say, "Oh, it looks like it's got intelligence." And I've heard that I've heard that applied to these types of ball lights that people see that will move around, and they'll kind of like maybe even move around a person. And I've also seen reports where, for example, here's something interesting. So I remember even a MUFON case where you had a red orbed light that was moving toward a car that was actually heading about 65 miles an hour, and the object came over next to that and stayed up with that same speed of the vehicle from one side, and then kind of like went over to the other side. And you had, the Foo Fighter phenomenon is kind of like that, in a sense that they kind of like came up near a plane and they might move around the plane, like there's some sort of an intelligence there. Well, here you had this case in Cloverdale where there's an instance where they see the light above the track and the train comes, and at that point that the train comes, it now kind of like attaches itself and is following along with the train. Now, to me, if you look at all those kind of instances right there, what do you see? You see an object that is next to a metallic object. Okay? These are moving vehicles. These are moving aircraft. And what do we know? There's probably there's batteries and everything else associated with it. So I think that what happens is they have some sort of an electromagnetic connection or a magnetic connection to that object, which is why they suddenly trail with the plane, the train, and everything else. Mm-hmm. So I think that and we might say, oh, well, that seems like it's pretty intelligent because it was doing that, but maybe it's just the fact that again there's a connection to it being near a metallic object.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you also mentioned that they mostly move east-west, which is also interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting in that sense that there's this repeatable pattern, and so that's what's curious about it for me is like, are there any underground water, maybe like kinds of rivers, if you would, are they trailing that? And so is there a magnetic kind of effect that's going on that makes it want to trail that way? And so part of what we want to do with the project is actually get some baselines and go up and do measurements, find out what we can to see if there's any kind of thing like that may be coming into play. Why do they go east to west? Or west to east and that direction? And from what I've seen in terms of the geological studies and stuff like that I've got, you don't really see anything that sticks out like this is what would be causing it.
Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, that would be big for ufology too, and that's what's exciting about these projects, even when it comes to these balls of light, is that if it can be proven there is a phenomena of balls of light that, move around, and, that can be visible at night. I mean, that would be a big deal for ufology, and that sure, some people may be bummed, and I think a lot of people don't want to know if something like that exists, but that way it helps us to know what's really unusual.
Yeah, to me, you're absolutely right. And to me, Al, I mean, you know it as well as I do. The vast majority of the UFO cases that we get are typically IFOs. They're explainable phenomena, right? Mm-hmm. So it's when we get down into some of these things, because science doesn't have an answer to what these orbs are, these types of lights or luminous phenomena. I think that we would benefit our ufology by being able to understand these so that we could clearly eliminate them from being the UFO. You know what I'm saying? So let's get to know this phenomenon that keeps getting reported that we can't explain, and they end up being thrown into the UFO category when indeed they have an explanation as being IFOs. So, and I think that this. It helps us out from a standpoint of understanding atmospheric physics, and so to me, I think that there's benefit in doing this, and for us to get smarter about the things that we know, and because these things, like I said, are relatively unknown, and we are trying to figure them out. Let's get an answer to them, and we can eliminate them from the UFO equation. So,
and it also,
they're not tied to just. They're not tied just to these areas, is what I'm also going to suggest. Is that whatever phenomena is creating this thing, whether it be a piezoelectric type of thing from a fault zone or whatever like that, or some people suggest that it might be a gas that somehow ignites. The fact that it goes into a plasma state, which is extremely hot, by the way. I mean. And it does what it does. We ought to understand the physics of how that thing happens, and it would help us out in a lot of different ways. Sorry.
I think it also helps legitimize the field of UFO study because, when the definition of a UFO is something that we haven't identified yet. If we begin to identify and especially come up with more prosaic answers, but something that's unknown and that adds to science, I think that really legitimizes the field and the research.
I can't agree with you more. And the fact that we can now get technology pretty inexpensively, we can go out and get some readings on this. Might be able to get some sort of like indications. I intend to go out there with a drone and fly it as close as I can but again, going back to want to be able to film it up close, learn from it that way. We're going to be looking at, and I've actually got Shalon Holt is going to be providing me some of his devices, and we're going to be putting those out into farming areas and seeing if that will help register anything. And I'm looking for other people who are interested, by the way, and some of your listeners who would be interested in we're looking around the late fall and maybe early winter time frame of this year. But to actually go out, and we're looking to be able to set up our gear and stuff like that. And they may have gear that we'd like to be able to test and to do anything to gather data that we can. So that's kind of like where I'm hoping to go. And I've been building a project plan, looking at the types of things and trying to set up, different kinds of experiments that we can do. I've got people I've already talked to a couple colleges. And they're going to get back to me with some, whether they can have some support. But
cool.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So, that's kind of the future of what you're doing here is that, you want to take it to that next level. So I guess what you're going to be doing is kind of similar to some of those projects you had mentioned earlier, Hesdalen being one of them, but like the UFOTOG project or UFO data, where they're putting together kind of these viewing stations, right, where they can film and get other types of telemetry on these objects.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And what we lack is, and throughout this whole, UFO phenomena, is good data. And that you're going back to the point where I think a lot of people feel that the scientific study of UFOs has been a waste. It hasn't given us anything, right? But we've never had these tools before until now. And we didn't have people that were willing to go out and to do this kind of like level of grunt work and rigor. And so, I've always said, that we have, for the longest period of time, in the UFO history of the United States, on the known side, we have had little scientific study of this phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
We've had scientists who sat there and read reports, but what I'm saying is engaging and putting equipment out, and there's very few of that. You have people that, like Ray Stanford had Project Starlight International years and years ago that I was impressed with, where he actually had some equipment. And there's been maybe a few others, but it's not been done from a broader standpoint, and we've not attacked it. And we're just now getting started with that. So I think that we might be able to get more scientific data now than we could in the past.
Why do you think that hasn't happened in the past?
I think that, it's a matter that the technology wasn't there. Mm-hmm. Who had a computer in the before 1980? Who had that? When I did my investigations back in the early days of '64 and after that, I didn't have any equipment. I didn't have anything that I could really do. I had a pair of binoculars. I had maybe a Geiger counter. That's about it. I had a compass I could walk around with. But I didn't have any, and no funding to be able to do it. So it was all just me walking around in fields trying to do what I could do and going investigating cases. That didn't really amount to much. And then you'd hear about maybe some people that said, well, we ought to do this, but we just, the cost of technology was too great. Now you can, your smartphone is way more capable of doing all different kinds of things. It's got a gravimeter. It's got all types of other kinds of things associated with it, the accelerometers. So my cell phone alone can become a tool. I just bought the other day a way that I can get a diffraction grating attached to my phone, and I can get a spectral image now. So, that's unheard of. You can use your smartphone to be able to record radiation. They've got little attachments to be able to help you to do that. So you have Teslameter, which there's a little app that allows you to be able to do different things like that with the magnetic relationship. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the tools are out there now. They're getting down to the root level, and now's the time to be able to attack it. And I think that that's why it wasn't done in the past. They just didn't have tools. They couldn't get money for it.
Yeah, resources. The few groups and not only that, people seem not as excited, unfortunately, with some of those findings. I guess it's always kind of the case with science. I just got done watching the whole miniseries on Einstein Genius from National Geographic, which was great. And he had sort of the same problem. For some reason, he became famous, mostly probably because of his hair. But unfortunately, people didn't care about the details of things he was excited about often. Because even France, for example, they've been able to spend some resources, and they have discovered some cases in which there was a physical effect, an electromagnetic effect in particular in a couple of cases, and they're really excited about that. And that has actually, even those are old cases, inspired them to continue investigating UFOs to this day. So there is a little bit of science that's been done out there, but it takes a lot of resources and time and money and equipment that just so far, civilian researchers haven't been able to afford.
Exactly. So I'm encouraged. I think that the future is wide open in the form of science and technology being applied to UFOs because it's getting affordable. And if you have those people around the country that are interested in science and want to apply it, we're all game for that. I mean, that's I applaud the effort. I mean, but we need to also do the rigor of writing up our reports and getting them into scientific journals and having them peer reviewed. All those things that you would expect. And I say that because you just don't want a half-baked article sent out to the world, and then it all gets criticized, and everybody's going to be critical of it. Well, it's not science. And even scientists, when they put together their papers and they try to get them peer-reviewed, go through a lot of abuse and a lot of time and effort from other scientists, So I guess what I'm trying to say is we've got to figure this out, and how can we do it, and how can we work jointly with, and I'll say this right now, between even skeptics and debunkers and everything else. If you apply scientists to it, I think that you'd find a less resistance. But they seem to want to go after the fact that we didn't do our homework, that we weren't disciplined, and we weren't this. And if you have facts and data, they can stand up on their own.
And expert opinion. And often it's hard to get these experts when you aren't a credible organization, or you're not doing things in a way that they recognize as credible. So that's really important too. Yep.
So for those of us who have an interest in the UFO phenomenon, wanting to solve it or to explain it or come up with answers and stuff like that, we really have to become more disciplined and more objective, and we have to ditch all these crazy ideas about the secret space programs and all that other stuff like that, and start to really focus on the study of the phenomena as it stands right now.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead. I was just getting excited about that comment because it's like, you can have
Get excited.
You can have anecdotal information all day long, and of course, those of us in this field receive that anecdotal information all day long. Extraordinary claims, but as Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, which sets our bar really high. But it's worth the effort.
By the way, I like what Stanton Freeman says. Extraordinary claims requires extraordinary investigation.
That's a really good one too. Which, he's put in some really hard work in the past, no doubt about that. Well, we're pretty much out of time, but I am really excited, and that's what's fun, bringing people like you on, because there are people, and I know a lot of our listeners who get kind of bummed, with when they see a lot of groups or organizations moving towards the fringe. Not that it's, everybody has a right to do what they want, but it's scary to see people move away from some of the harder stuff that I think is going to be more fruitful, especially with getting the mainstream involved with all of this. And so it's great to see people like you that are continuing to just kind of roll up your sleeves and get at it.
Yep. And I'm looking for more people that want to do that too. So, by all means, that's what we need. And thank you for helping us to get the word out to people that this is what we need to do as well.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show again. The time flew. Oh, my gosh. It felt like a couple of minutes instead of, 45 minutes or so. So thanks for coming on again, and I'm sure we'll be talking again in the future.
All right. Now, you have a nice one. Nice summer, by the way.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much to Rich Hoffman for being on the show. Really exciting stuff. It's so cool that, there is science being done out there, and that there are people doing the hard work to try to investigate some of this phenomena in a more scientific way. I know it's a lot of hard work, but it's so worth doing, in my humble opinion. And I'm very happy that people like Rich are doing this. Now, he talked about the Scientific Coalition for Ufology, and they are the group that investigated the Puerto Rico case that, we've had Robert Powell on, we've had Morgan Beale on, or Bell on, and we've had Rich on talking about that. You can see that report at the Scientific Coalition for Ufology website, which is explorescu.org. Explorescu.org. You can see the video and get the full report. Also, you might see it online, especially like at the Open Minds UFO News Facebook group, people battling and kind of having ideas about what is in that video. And the SCU is taking a look at that, and they do take people very seriously. In fact, I think that they really do a lot of work and bend over backwards for the critics out there because, they invite criticism, especially constructive, credible criticism. So they are trying to answer those questions, and you can see that at that website, explorescu.org. So we'll see what happens with that as time goes on. Will they discover this to be something mundane, or will it be discovered that it is something much, much more mysterious? Stay tuned. So you can check that out. Also, as we said earlier, the SCU is going to be doing more and more exciting stuff now that Rich has freed up time because he's not doing the MUFON thing. I know he and others are going to be spending more time doing some really cool research and, getting together people who are interested in the science of things. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. You can go to openminds.tv to find out about any of the stuff that we talked about. All of those stories that Martin and I talked about, openminds.tv. Of course, like I said, go to my Facebook and my Twitter account so you can follow some of my adventures coming up in next week. And my Facebook, you can just find Alejandro T. Rojas, and you'll see in parentheses Open Minds for that account. And then also for Twitter, it's just Alejandro T. Rojas. So please go check that out. I would love for you to join me on my trips, on my journey to Mars. Ought to be a lot of fun. Or Budapest. I don't know why, but when I see the word Budapest, I like to say Budapest. I don't know if that's a real accent that people say, and I got that from television, but Budapest. It just sounds fun to do that, and that's how I like to say the name of that town, and it's interesting that I'll actually be there. But otherwise, UFO Congress, lots of new stuff going on there. You can go. There's new videos up on the video on demand, including my video and what Ryan Sprague we've got up there. And I've got more that'll be coming up next week. So also UFOcongress.com, and you can see some of the speakers that we've listed. In fact, one of the people we're going to have is Ann Druffel. Some of you that know her will know how exciting that is because she hasn't been around for a while, and she's been a researcher for many, many years. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, just go to ufocongress.com to see more because I'm running out of time, and I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Caleb Hanks for the opening and close music. I want to say thank you to Systematics, who created that bumper music for me. I also want to thank KGRA for hosting Open Minds now. I hope you KGRA listeners are enjoying us. And then I also want to thank Martin Willis from Podcast UFO for joining me with the news. He's always a lot of fun. He is a goofy fella. So thank you to everybody. And of course, as usual, thank you to you, the listener. I am so happy that you listen. Go check out the Devil's Tower thing because, again, I love to see listeners. And it's always fun to see people who listen to the show and say hey and see what you look like and all of that good stuff. Happens at every conference, and it's a